Apocalyptic, which means what? What does apocalyptic mean? I can't hear y'all all the way back there. Y'all going to have to really speak up. This is kind of weird. I got one big group here, I got a little group here, and then y'all way back in. I could have put my thing right there in the middle, but then I couldn't see. All right. Apocalyptic means it's written in symbols. It's symbolic. Okay? What we read about in Revelation, these kinds of things, these pictures that John describes to us, that this artist has painted as John described it, they're symbolic of bigger ideas, of different ideas. There's not really a beast with wings and all of this stuff going on. It's representations of God's judgment, God's action in the world, okay? And remember, you can't take, if you take any part of Revelation literally, meaning this is the picture, so that's got to happen, then you have to take it all that way. And we'll run into really big problems when you try to do that, okay? And as we said, the book of Revelation is composed mainly of what? What's that? Visions, but where, even those visions, though, come from where? Most of the time. Most of Revelation are actually quotes from the Old Testament. These are things that first century Jews would have seen before. This is imagery they would have seen before. We're really going to see that tonight. Okay, we get to, I kind of want to give you a kind of a preview of chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13 before we start with chapter 10 tonight, okay? Revelation 13 gives us a real picture of horrifying strength of purpose and wickedness. We're going to see two beasts that are empowered by the dragon. And these are going to be a fierce pair along with this fiery dragon as well. Okay, so in between this picture, which we just finished, the sixth seal, in between this picture and Revelation 13, where there's another picture of beasts and dragons, there's kind of a buffer in between. There's kind of a period of in between where the vision John gets is to calm and reassure the churches, to say, it's all going to be okay. And don't forget this. Revelation in 2 words means what? Well, what? Sum it up in 2 words for me. What is it? We win. We win. That's it. If anybody ever asks you, what does Revelation mean? We win. That's what it means. All of the imagery, all of the pictures, all of the weird stuff conveys one message from God to his people: we win. Okay? That's what these 7 churches to whom Revelation is written to needed to hear, because they were centered right in the middle of the Roman Empire, and Rome was coming under the judgment of God, and they, because they were in Rome, were going to suffer because of Rome's judgment. And Jesus, through John, reassures his people, even though you're in the middle of an ungodly pagan nation, and even though I'm coming in judgment of that ungodly pagan nation, you're going to be okay. Okay? But now remember, does okay mean you're not going to suffer physical harm? No, it doesn't. Matter of fact, he tells them, some of you are going to what? Die as a result. But to the child of God, is death the worst thing? No, it's not. It's not. Okay? So we have bookended between the 6th seal we have here and chapters 13, Revelation 10 through 12, and it's kind of a buffer of comfort, if you will. Okay? We're going to see this terrible trio, the dragon, his 2 beasts. They're going to represent Rome's power, their religion, their seduction. We'll get into all that later. But then we're going to see a strong angel tonight in Revelation 10 reassure the saints that, you know what, it doesn't matter about all these beasts because you're still going to win. So let's just jump into it. Revelation chapter 10. I got to get there. Here we go. Here's the picture. We're going to tackle, let's just go the first 7 here. Then I saw a mighty angel, another mighty angel, coming down from heaven, wrapped in a cloud, with a rainbow over his head, and his face was like the sun, and his legs like pillars of fire. He had a little scroll in his hand, and he set his foot right on the sea, and his left foot on the land. And he called out with a loud voice, like a lion roaring. When he called out, the 7 thunders sounded. And when the 7 thunders had sounded, I was about to write, but I heard a voice from heaven saying, "Seal up what the 7 thunders have said, and do not write it down." And the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and what is in it, the earth and what is in it, and the sea and what is in it, and that there would be no more delay. But in the days of the trumpet call to be sounded by the 7th angel, the mystery of God will be fulfilled, just as he announced to his servants, the prophets. Okay, let's stop there. Okay, we get this picture of this angel, this mighty angel. And this mighty angel comes, and when he talks, it sounds like thunder. And the thunder actually responds to him. It says the 7 thunders respond to him, and they call out as well. And they call out with the message, right? The mighty angel, their message is what? What was the message coming from the thunder? That's right, Lincoln. There will be no more delay. In other words, let's go all the way back to the beginning. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Remember at the first when we started talking about Revelation? And there was a question posed. There was a question posed by the souls under the altar. Okay? And the souls under the altar asked what? How long? How long? How long what? How long until we are avenged? These are the souls who had been martyred on behalf of Christ, all right? And the question they ask is how long? Now, what is the message that's coming from heaven right now? You want to know when? There will be no more delay. It's happening. There's no more time. They've received all the warnings they need. When the last trumpet will be blown, the trumpet will be the final and total and complete destruction of the people of God's enemy. Okay? What he's saying is, saints, you don't have to worry anymore. But I want you to notice the description of this angel. All right, he's referred to as mighty, coming down from heaven, robed in a cloud, rainbow above his head. Face was like the sun. His legs were like fiery pillars. So he's got a cloud, a crown, a rainbow. Feet are like pillars of fire. One foot's in the sea, the other foot's on the land. When he speaks, it sounds like the roar of a lion. Who do you think it is? What's that? Paul says Jesus. What's that? God. Okay. Those are really good guesses. Okay. I'm going to say they're both wrong, but and here's why. I will say this. Some commentators believe this could be Jesus. The problem with it, though, is Jesus is referred to a lot of things in Revelations. He's referred to as a lamb. He's referred to as a lion. He's referred to as the Son of Man. He's referred to as a warrior, a judge, the Son of God. But he's never called an angel. Ever. Okay? Now, does that mean it couldn't be? No, it doesn't. Okay? But in my head, I think it is more, this is someone doing God's bidding. This is an angel doing God's bidding with the power of God himself. And the reason why I say it's not God is because the angel at the end of this turns around and he swears to the one in heaven. Remember? Look at the end of the text. He actually makes a statement to, where is it? Yeah, the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land raised his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever. I think that's God. I think the angel is swearing his allegiance to God, that he is going to carry out whatever it is God has petitioned him to go do. Okay, but I also think because there's so much similarities between the description of this angel and how Jesus himself has been referenced before, I think this is one angel coming in with the authority of Christ himself. Okay, to do his work, to do his bidding. All right. Let me ask you this: what does thunder do for you? When you hear thunder, what does it do? What's that? It makes Daryl happy. Because you know why? Because the lightning missed you? No. What is? Did you say thunder made you happy? Yeah, I did. Okay. Yeah, why? When I lived in Japan, I never heard of thunder for 3 years. Oh, wow. And I'm like, this little southern thing. I talked to meteorologists, and they're like, no, it's lightning. And I said, I know what it is. Even in the South, it happens all the time. Right. It doesn't happen everywhere in the world the same. Huh. I would have never known that. Daryl, for those of you who are listening in, Daryl said thunder makes him happy because when he was in Japan, it didn't thunder, and he missed it. Growing up in the South, you hear thunder, and so now when he hears thunder, it makes him happy. But let me ask you this: from living in Oklahoma, thunder meant something else. Well, I mean, springtime, we got a lot of thunder. We got a lot of lightning. But if you heard a rumble in the distance, it would immediately draw your attention to that area because you knew there's a potential for something coming. So in a way, thunder's kind of a warning. It's God's way of telling us, hey, there's something out here you might want to pay attention to. Okay? It's especially that way in the book of Revelation. When you hear this thunder, it's a warning of something's coming, something's about to take place. Okay? 7 thunders would be complete warning or a complete announcement. The 7, the perfect. Okay? But notice, when the 7 thunders speak, John's about to write it down. Okay? That's his job, right? I mean, from the very beginning, he was told to do what? Write down what you see. Write down what you hear. Right? And so John hears what the 7 thunders warn, and he's about to do what he's been told to do, and then all of a sudden he gets redirected and told to do what? Don't write that down. Seal that up. Okay? Why? Maybe it's God's way of saying there's going to be no more warning. It's possible that whenever these thunders do speak, it will be the end of Rome as they knew it. They're going to be what the 7th trumpet will contain, the final and total defeat of God's enemy. Okay? Let's jump on. Verse 8. Any questions about that before we move on? It does my heart so good to know that I have completely and thoroughly covered this to the point where you have absolutely no questions whatsoever about it. You're still in shock?
Since this is an interlude, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, wait a minute.
Right.
And so
Yeah, well, and that's kind of, I had the other slide, but I didn't. Yeah, we kind of go from this scene to this scene, right? And it is kind of shocking. It is kind of, but it's also kind of that time when you could kind of, you know what I'm talking about in a movie? You know how it's really intense and it gets really intense and intense and intense and intense and intense, and then something big happens, and then there's kind of that period they kind of build in for you to kind of relax a little bit and catch your breath before the next thing starts again. It's kind of for dramatic pause. I'm not going to say God's using dramatic pause here, but in the middle of this whole buildup of the 6 seals, it's almost like God is saying, listen, I need you to calm down. I need you to recognize who's in control. That's exactly right.
So for me, if I was one of them, I would need that right there
Right.
to some degree
Yeah.
because all the other has been so horrible.
Dana brought up a good point for those of you online that didn't hear it. One of the things that we really haven't touched on a whole lot was when we first went through the first couple of chapters of Revelation, you remember most of the churches had warnings associated with their behavior. In other words, if you don't change this about yourself, if you don't stop doing this, your lampstand's going to be removed, or this judgment's going to come upon you as a body of Christ. And so at the same time, we're looking at this judgment coming upon the oppressor Rome. These other Christians who heard this warning about themselves and their own faith may be seeing this as judgment coming upon themselves. In other words, if I'm not one of God's select because of how I've been living, I can expect this.
The people of Rome aren't privy to this.
Right.
So, to me, in my head, it's not for Rome, it's for the churches to get it right.
That's exactly right.
Because they're not getting this opportunity.
Yeah. And that's a good point to remember. The book of Revelation is not written to the Romans. Okay? It's written to 7 churches who happen to be living in the middle of the Roman Empire. God's judgment is coming upon the Roman Empire. Now, the warning at the beginning for the 7 churches was, you need to get your lives right. Because if you're on the wrong side of this judgment, the result of this judgment could be eternal for you. In other words, if you are one of God's sealed, if you are one of God's protected, if you are one of God's who has a white robe, if you are one who is under the altar, who has stayed faithful to my name, then no matter what happens to this world, you will be protected. But if you claim to be a Christian, if you claim to be like all those 7 churches, if you claim to have it all right, but you don't, this judgment's coming upon them as well. Okay? And this is what you have to look forward to instead of this. Okay? So there's kind of 2 dynamics at play even among the 7 churches, those who are faithful, those who are not, those who need to repent. Here it talks about how Rome did not repent, but the real question is how many of those in those 7 churches repented and changed.
Right, because Rome has not repented.
Right.
They're doing what they're doing, and the churches know better. And they know who God is.
Right. The churches should know better.
So this is like their second. This is like your final chance. What's your final answer?
This is mom saying, "Did I ask you to clean your room? How many times do I have to ask?" You know, on the 3rd time, I don't know. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. Let's keep going. Verse 8. I've had enough. That's your last warning. That's your last chance. Okay, there you go. Verse 8 through 11. Then the voice that I heard from heaven spoke to me again, saying, "Go take the scroll that is open in the hand of the angel who is standing on the sea and on the land." So I went to the angel and told him to give me the little scroll. And he said to me, take and eat it. It will make your stomach bitter, but in your mouth it will be sweet as honey. And I took the little scroll from the hand of the angel and ate it, and it was sweet as honey in my mouth. But when I had eaten it in my stomach was made bitter. And I was told, you must again prophesy about many peoples and nations and languages and kings. Okay. So you see in the picture up here, the little scroll in the angel's hand, and John is told To do what? Eat it. Okay? That was bad. Eat it. Okay? And when he ate it, what happened? How did it taste when he ate it? Huh? It tasted good. It tasted sweet as honey. But when it hit his stomach, what? Bitter. Apocalyptic book. What is this symbolic of? You can figure this one out without me saying a word. What's that? When they first heard it, it made them happy. That then maybe later, after he understood it, it made him sad. Okay? Let me ask you this. What's the very last thing he was told to do? After he's told to eat it, he says, you must what? Prophesy again. Prophesy means to what? Tell forth. Not foretell, tell forth. To speak. Okay? And who's he to speak to? Okay? Let me ask you this. What is both sweet and sickening to the stomach? The gospel of Jesus Christ is both. It's sweet to those who hear it and obey it and live it, but it is sour to the stomach to those who don't. Because within the gospel also carries with it what? We'll talk about it Sunday. It couldn't have happened any better. We're going to talk about it Sunday. Mark 16, 15, and 16. He who believes and is baptized will be what? Saved. Sweet? Yeah. But he who believeth not, what? Will be condemned. There's the sour, there's the stomach. That's the message he's told to go. He's told to ingest this, and he's told to go take it out there, but understand, it'll be sweet, but it'll also turn your stomach. Now, just to show you Revelation and Old Testament, turn over to Ezekiel chapter 2. Okay? Ezekiel chapter 2. Listen, verse 8. We're going to read a little bit. Okay? But given what we just read in Revelation, I really want you to hear what happened in Ezekiel. But you, son of man, hear what I say to you. Do not be rebellious like that rebellious house. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and behold, a scroll of a book was in it. And he spread it before me, and it had writing on the front and on the back, and there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning and woe. And he said to me, Son of man, eat whatever you find here. Eat this scroll, and go speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me this scroll to eat. And he said to me, Son of man, feed your belly with this scroll that I give you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. And he said to me, Son of man, go to the house of Israel and speak with my words to them. For you are not sent to a people of foreign speech and a hard language, but to the house of Israel. Not to many people of foreign speech and a hard language, whose words you cannot understand. Surely, if I sent you to such, they would listen to you. But the house of Israel was not willing to listen to you, for they are not willing to listen to me. Because all the house of Israel had a hard forehead and a stubborn heart. Okay. We'll just stop there. But understand, you see the direct correlation between what happened in Ezekiel's vision and what we see in Revelation. To the people in Revelation, when they hear it, they totally would understand the symbolism going back to Ezekiel. Now, Ezekiel, when he ate this thing, it's symbolic as well. He's in the middle of a vision. He's ingesting. He's taking from God what God gives him. He's internalizing it. He's putting it into himself. And then he's going to give it back to Israel. But what's Israel going to do with it? What does he say? They got a hard forehead and a stubborn heart. What are they going to do with Ezekiel's message? They're going to ignore it. They're going to ignore it. And thus it will become bitter to him, because Ezekiel knows if my people will listen to what God is saying, they can be redeemed. It's got to be bitter. Is it bitter for us when the people we know who need the gospel won't listen to it? Man, I don't think there's anything more bitter in your heart than knowing that you have what people need and they just won't hear it. It just...
The people themselves then become bitter because things aren't going like they want it to go.
Right. Well, it depends upon who. And I think it can be applied both ways. It can be bitter for the one who ingests it and then wants to share it, and people won't receive it. I think it can be bitter for him. It can also be bitter in the sense of the person who doesn't receive it never gets the benefit of the sweetness that it can be. So it applies to both, I think, both the one who's giving the message and the one who's not receiving the message, either way. Okay?
They start blaming Christians more and more for the troubles.
Oh,
It's those Christians there.
sure.
So I become embittered against that truth that you're saying because I don't want to accept it.
Well, and the reality is, as sweet and as powerful and as good as the gospel is it always accepted readily and eagerly and happily by folks? No, not at all. But one of the messages I think that's being conveyed here to these churches is that even in the midst of all of this that's going on, even in the midst of persecution, even in the midst of Rome's occupation, even in the midst of all of this, guess what, John? You still have a responsibility to get the word out. That's not going to change. That's not going to change. It's not going to change for us. It's not going to change for those 7 churches. It didn't change for John. Okay? We are commissioned. Mark 16:15, right before the one we just read. Therefore, go and make disciples of who? All nations. The exact same thing that he tells John he's going to have to go prophesy to. All nations. Okay. I'm trying to figure it. Okay. We got to go on. Any other thoughts on this? Let's keep moving. Revelation. We're jumping on to 11 now. We got to get all the way back over there. Then, okay, I didn't really highlight this. It's in your study guide. These are really 4 kind of independent visions that he receives kind of in this section. Okay. He sees the angel, and then he gets the scroll, and now we go on to the next one, the third vision. He says, then I was given a measuring rod like a staff, and I was told, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship there, but do not measure the court outside the temple. Leave that out. For it will be given over to the nations, and they will trample the holy city for 42 months. And I will grant authority to my 2 witnesses, and they will prophesy for 1,260 days clothed in sackcloth. I went too far, but that's all right. Okay, let's talk about the first one. Revelation 11 tells us judgment's coming. The third of these 4 visions tells us, and he tells John to go measure the temple and the altar and to count the people. But he also tells him not to measure the outer court. What is the outer court in the temple known as? You know? The court of Gentiles, okay? If you were Gentile, you could go into the temple, you could go into the outside court, which is called the court of the Gentiles, but then there was a separation where you had to be a Jew to go beyond that. Gentiles had to stay out there. So he's told to measure, okay, the temple. Now, again, I'm going to take you to Ezekiel 40 just to show you how these are connected. In Ezekiel 40, 1 through 4, the Bible tells us this. In the 25th year of our exile, at the beginning of the year, on the 10th of the month, in the 14th year after the fall of the city, that's after the fall of Jerusalem, on that very day, the hand of the Lord was upon me, and he took me there. In visions of God, he took me to the land of Israel. He set me on a very high mountain on whose south side were some buildings that looked like a city. He took me there, and I saw a man whose appearance was like bronze. He was standing in the gateway with a linen cord and a measuring rod in his hand. The man said to me, Son of man, look with your eyes and hear with your ears and pay attention to everything I'm going to show you, for that is why you have been brought here. Tell the house of Israel everything you see. So, in Ezekiel's passage, he sees a guy with a cord to measure. He shows him the temple. And I want you to see how these two are tied together, okay? Because the key word here is tell. The key word given to John is tell. The key word given to Ezekiel is tell. In Ezekiel 42:20, drop it on down. He says, so he measured the area on all four sides. It had a wall around it, 500 cubits long, 500 cubits wide. Listen to this, to separate the holy from the common. Okay? What is the purpose of measuring off the temple and not the outside court? Separation. Separation between what? Between, as Ezekiel said, between that which was holy and that which was common. Now, in a Christian vernacular, what will we say there? Those who are saved, those who are lost, those who are Christians, those who are not. However you want it, those who are God's children, those who are not. Okay? Now, the symbolism here is important to understand. Why does God measure things? Why does God count things? Why? Huh? Okay, why do you think? Give me one reason. Okay. How many? Oh, I was going to ask how many of y'all had money, but that's the college bunch. Why do you count things? What's that? Because they belong to you. Because you're interested, because they're property. What's something that's valuable to you? What's that? I know he knows that. We know God knows that. So what is, okay, but again, this isn't for God. Who's it for? It's for John. Who's it really for? The church. And for God to say, I want an accurate count, says what? If you're that church. Huh? You're accountable? Yeah. Well, not only are you accountable, you are countable. In other words, you are God's possession. God is counting his possession. Of what value is that to you? What does that communicate to you? What's that? I can't understand. You're one of his. And what does one of his mean? What does being one of his mean? He loves and he cares for you and he protects you. You protect your own. You take care of your own. Like I said, this is kind of an aside in between the beasts to say, don't forget, your God cares for you. Okay? John was told to measure the temple of God. He was told to measure the altar. He was told to measure the worshipers there. Let me ask you this. At this time in history, how many temples were there? Okay. So far as Christians went, how many temples were there? First century Christian at the time this is going on. How many temples were there? Huh? Actually, depending upon when you date Revelation, there wasn't even one in Jerusalem anymore because it had been destroyed by Rome in AD 70. Okay? So when he talks about the temple, and all the Christian writing up until this point indicates what is the temple of God. We are. Paul tells us what? 1 Corinthians 6:19. We are God's temple. 1 Corinthians 3:16. Don't you know that you yourselves are God's temple and that God's Spirit lives in you? Ephesians 2. We are all members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ Jesus himself as the chief cornerstone. In him the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him you are too being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. Okay, understand, when he talks about measuring the temple and measuring the altar, altar is an Old Testament word for what? Sacrifice. But what? Sacrifices were a means of what? What? Praise, worship to God. Okay? So when he's talking about measuring, I see the temple and the altar, he's looking at it all, who we are. And he's looking at the church. Okay? It's really interesting. John measured the church, the inner sanctuary. There are two words used for temple. The word Hieron, H-I-E-R-O-N, okay, is used to refer to the temple complex. That's what we normally think of with the Holy of Holies and the holy place and the court of women and the court of Gentiles. That whole mound that's Hieron, okay? And then there's Naos. And Naos only refers to the Holy of Holies, the holy place. And that is the word John uses here when he describes the temple. He uses that Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary of God. But understand now, where in the Christian today is the inner sanctuary of God? Where is the Holy of Holies? Where is the place where God dwells? In our hearts. He's here. Okay? So God's measuring and he's looking. He talks about the altar and sacrifices. We could read the passage of Hebrews 13, but we're not going to. I'm going to stop right there before we go any further. Any questions? Any questions? That's a pretty good place. I can pick it up there next week and we can keep going on. So don't lose your handouts. Okay. Tonight, I know we covered a lot, and I know I talked fast. And if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask or jot them down or email me or text me and let me know, and we'll deal with them. Okay? But one of the things I just want to impress upon you after tonight is simply this: God is trying to communicate to His churches, to His people. Okay, in the midst of a country that is in the middle of all kinds of bad behavior going on in Rome, and God's going to come in judgment, and some bad things are going to start happening. There's going to be internal problems, there's going to be external problems, there's going to be wars that come, there's going to be all kinds of stuff that happen, and we're going to see that historically play out over a couple of hundred years until Rome finally meets its ultimate demise. And understand, yeah, Rome's still there today, and it's still there in Italy. It's not like he just threw the boot completely off into the sea, but Rome actually functioning as a power in the world, and that day ended, okay? But he wants to reassure his church that no matter what's going on, he loves us. He takes care of us. And we have a place to be with him eternally, forever, because of his son. And I would just encourage you. I know we are in crazy times. And every time I turn on the news, it's like it's gotten crazier. And it just keeps getting crazier. And I hear people on from all sides and all spectrums, and they start shouting and they start screaming and they start blaming. But the reality is, you know what? At the end of the day, God's still on the throne, and he's always going to be on the throne. Earthly kingdoms come and go. If Revelation tells me anything, it's that. Earthly kingdoms come and go, and they have been coming and going ever since Adam and Eve walked out of the garden, and they will continue to come and go until Jesus comes back to call us all home. But in the end, there is a king that will always be on the throne, and he is the one we serve, ultimately. And he's the one that deserves our allegiance. And tonight, if you're struggling, if you're scared, if you're anything and you need prayers, please let us know. Or if you need to respond to God's gospel of Jesus Christ, whatever you need, let us know. We're going to stand. We're going to sing a song.